Live from the Hay House I Can Do It conference in Las Vegas, it's Conversations to Awaken Your Soul.
Hi, I'm Summer McStravick. Welcome to Conversations to Awaken Your Soul, being taped live here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm your host this hour, and I'm joined by, well, most of you already know Dr. Wayne Dyer. We co-host our program together every Monday on HayHouseRadio.com, Dr. Wayne Dyer's Inspiration. But he's also, of course, best known perhaps for his latest book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, which is the subject of his new public television special, which is currently airing on your local PBS station. You can also see him regularly on TV's Ellen. So I'm happy to introduce you to Dr. Wayne Dyer and Dr. Bruce Lipton. Now, Dr. Bruce Lipton has written a book called The Biology of Belief, Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and Miracles, which describes how the mind's perception of the environment, not genes, controls life at the cellular level. And incidentally, to find out more about this, you can always visit brucelipton.com or drwaynedyer.com. Why don't you two start by introducing yourselves to one another?
Okay. Hi, Bruce.
Hi, Wayne. Can I say something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Mom, I made it because I'm on the stage with Wayne Dyer.
Listen, every once in a while, Summer, every once in a while, something comes across my desk, a book, a tape, a movie, something, and because hundreds, maybe thousands of them come across over each year, and so many of them you don't even have time to examine and look at. But I got a call from my friend Reed Tracy, who's the president of Hay House, and he said, there's a book out there that I think you'd really like and really appreciate. And he sent me the book called The Biology of Belief. And I'm working on a new book. It's called Excuses Be Gone. It won't be out till next year sometime. And I decided to, just before I started writing, just for some reason to pick up this book on Reed's recommendation. And usually I start at the beginning, get through a few pages, go to the end, flip through it, and say, nice job. But it wasn't like that with this book. It was a life-changing experience. It really helped me to formulate what I was going to do with my next book about eliminating the excuses that we have for why our life isn't working at the level we'd like it to be working at. And he called me, and Summer called and said, we'd like you to do an hour as you usually do here at Hay House Radio. Who would you like to be with? Last year I was with Marianne Williamson, and she is much better looking than you are now that you're seeing you up close. Yeah. But I said, well, if you can get Bruce to do an hour with me, and we met literally a minute ago, 2 minutes ago. Right. Yeah. And so I said I'd love to do an hour with him. I'd like to talk to him and have him talk to you about the phenomenal ideas in there, because just recently on a television show there was a fellow talking about something that had happened in his life, and he said, I can change my behavior, and there's a lot of things that I can change in my life, but the thing that I can't change is my DNA. I can't change my genetics. I can't help the way I am. It's just what I inherited. And I sat there and thought, that's what so many people think. And Bruce's work has helped me to look at one of the biggest excuses that we have, that we can't alter the genetic patterns or the DNA. And this man has the credentials. He's taught at medical schools for over 20 years and left because he realized that the field of medicine was really doing a disservice to the truth. And I want you all to meet this man and to buy this book and to look at it and examine the biology of belief, because I think it's going to go soaring across the country when enough of us begin to realize that we're not trapped by our DNA. In fact, we have the capacity to alter it and make of our lives anything we want. And you did a great job on it, Bruce, and I'd like you to just sort of take over and we'll talk about it and wail from here.
Well, Wayne, thank you for that. And I'm really excited because it's been years that I started working on this book, actually about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the problem I had basically was trying to translate it from the science down into the lay audience, and that was a real difficult part. But I think it worked out very well, and the reason why it's so important is because it brings into a new science that leading-edge scientists are aware of, but the public has no information about it. Right. And it's a major disconnect because we've been all programmed with a belief that we are sort of victims of our heredity. that we didn't pick the genes that we came with, we can't change the genes that we come with, and then hook that with the belief that the genes control who we are, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, I'm a victim. I can't get out of my own heredity. And it's an unfortunate situation because what we now know in this new field, it's called, the great name is called epigenetic control. And people are going to be very familiar with this very soon because it replaces the standard belief called genetic control. Genetic control literally means control by genes. The new science is called epigenetic control, and what's neat about it is the prefix epi means above. So what you say epigenetic control, what you're saying is control above the genes. And this is where it comes into the simple reality that the environment and our perception of the environment actually can rewrite our genetic code. It doesn't change the DNA. It changes the readout of the DNA. DNA are the genes, and genes are blueprints. And the blueprints make the building blocks of your body called the proteins. Well, what's interesting about epigenetics, while it doesn't change the genetic code, you can create over 30,000 different variations from the same blueprint, the same gene. And all of a sudden it says, then you're not limited by your genes, you're limited, if anything, by your perception and your belief about the world that you live in, because that's the information that's going in and affecting the genes.
Do doctors, do people in the medical field, one of the things you said in the biology of belief was that you left the field of medicine largely because they were just using things like drugs and surgery as a way of treating illnesses. So I'm thinking about the average person out there who goes to a doctor and finds out that they've been diagnosed with some kind of an ailment or illness and leave thinking there's nothing that I can do about it. It's
well, that's that victimization part
right.
again. And then when you realize you're a victim, and here's the main part of being a victim. If you're a victim, you need a rescuer. And then somebody wants to come in and rescue you. And of course, they're not going to do it for free. So all of a sudden, you're building an industry to rescue you from something that you actually have control over yourself. And that's why it's really important to recognize what science has recognized, what medicine has recognized, but has totally not brought to the public attention as much as it should. And that is that it has now been established that a minimum of 1/3 and more likely 2/3 of all medical healing, which includes surgery and drugs and everything else, is all accomplished through what is called the placebo effect. And that basically says that it's the mind of the patient and their belief system that ultimately determines whether the drugs or the surgery are going to manifest any difference. And so I can say out, like I say, well, ask the audience, how many people are familiar with the placebo effect? And surely a large number of people are going to raise their hand, but here's the thing that they're not familiar with. There's something called the nocebo effect. And the nocebo effect is essentially the same as a placebo effect, but it's based on something different. It says a negative belief can hurt you, if not kill you, as much as a positive belief can heal you. And so the real serious issue is that it's really the power of belief. Positive or negative are equally powerful, but go in opposite directions.
Right. In your book, you have, I don't know if you, we haven't rehearsed anything here, so I don't know if you're familiar with every little detail of it. I always hate that when I get on the show and they'll say, now on page 321 of a book you wrote 17 years ago, you said, and explain it. But there is a story, especially this is relevant because of what happened to me yesterday with my knee. I've got a brace on here, but you tell a story in there, a piece of research about 3 different groups of people who went in for knee replacement or knee surgery.
Arthroscopic surgery.
Yeah, can you tell them that story? It's
basically, arthroscopic surgery, and I forgot, I think they do about 180,000 of these operations a year, and these are people who have trouble walking and they have issues with their knee. So arthroscopic surgery is you cut an incision on each side of the knee, you flush out the joint fluid in the knee, so that's part one, and then they take a little scraper and they go inside and try to scrape the inside and smooth off the surfaces so that the knee works smoothly. And the issue is, this is a doctor at Houston, wanted to do a study. He said he really wanted to find out, was it the rinsing out of the fluid or the scraping of the knee that really provided the major healing process. So he was going to do this as a research study, and the woman who was helping him said, but you must include a placebo group. And he said, what are you talking about? And she said, a placebo group, a fake surgery. And she said, come on, I'm a surgeon. We all know that surgery is what really does it. Why should I waste my time with this? She said, you want to do an experiment, you need to have a placebo group. So he fabricated a placebo operation. What he would do is he'd make the 2 incisions, the patient, of course, couldn't see their knee. There was a draping over it. And what he would do was put on the video screen a surgery that he had done earlier in videotape from somebody else. And so what he would do is the patient would get the incisions, they'd watch the surgery, and he would talk through the surgery like, overdubbing, saying, oh, yeah, everything's going great, Mr. X, and Mr. X is watching the screen and all that. So that was the placebo surgery. Didn't do anything, made 2 incisions, sewed it back up. They looked at the results, and the results were every process was equally the same. Whether they rinsed it out, whether they scraped it and rinsed it out, or whether they just did the incisions and nothing at all. And the beautiful part was the surgeon who was like, I'm a surgeon. We know we make differences. And the reality is he had to own, and it was like really difficult, he had to say that all I'm doing is creating a very elaborate and very expensive placebo. And the mind did the healing.
So you're saying that a person can go in and be told that they had surgery on their knee and have had nothing done, and their knee will heal?
That's exactly what the results revealed. So the experiment was already published results, so it's not, like anecdotal evidence. This is scientific study.
So the power, we're talking about the power of perception then, the power of our minds to be able to overcome virtually anything. I'm thinking about this head of mine here.
I have the same. I was thinking the same thing.
Wondering why,
we're walking the same path.
Right.
I'm just behind you a little bit.
I was thinking of
I've always
having the
believed
powder
that,
person
you don't
come out
waste
here.
you don't waste your testosterone on growing hair, and anybody can do that. But going back to literally. Let's take a patient who's just been told, and there's a lot of them, and there's many of them here today, that many after I spoke last night told me, who've just been diagnosed with something like cancer, something, a severe heart disease, and so on. What would you recommend to them?
The first thing I'd recommend is to recognize this, is that, for example, especially, let's say, heart disease, because that one right off is a great one. 90% or more of all cardiovascular patients, the whole thing is only due to lifestyle. And Dean Ornish from San Francisco actually revealed this in many studies. He said, look, rather than giving conventional medication, which all my other cardiac physicians are doing, what I'm going to do is take a group of patients and teach them a better nutritional diet system, teach them stress reduction techniques, meditation techniques. Didn't give them any medication, compared that to his regular group of patients receiving drugs. Here was the result. Well, patients, cardiovascular patients on drugs, the best that the physician really hopes for is that the drugs will stop the degeneration, and they call that success. Dean Ornish's group, which took no drugs, not only stopped the degeneration, they went beyond that. They actually regenerated the heart tissue. And the relevance about this is that we all have the ability to regenerate our tissues and organs, because every one of us is completely filled with stem cells. And why that's important is stem cells will repair any tissue damage in your body. And the problem, though, is then why are we giving all of our stem cell research to the pharmaceutical industry so they could figure out how to make them work? My joke, which I think, is that they want us to believe that God gave us stem cells and no way to make them work until the pharmaceutical company figures it out. But it's really, more precisely, a stem cell, like every other cell in your body, is based, its operation is based on the environment or the perception of the environment. The stem cell's environment is reflected in the perception of the patient. When a patient hears that they cannot heal themselves, when there's something that's terminal, or any of these other issues, that perception alone can stop the entire healing process right there and set themselves up. Even if they get a date that they're going to die, this becomes a perceptual program, and the system will ultimately lead to a death on or near the specific date.
I was blessed back. Go ahead, Summer.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify for members of the audience who are listening and thinking stem cells. You don't mean embryonic stem cells. You don't mean that. You mean we all have our own internal
Yes,
stem
every
cells
one of us
already floating around, actively generating.
Absolutely. Here's a simple reason why. Every day we lose billions and billions of our, that sounds like Carl Sagan, billions and billions of our cells are dying every day just out of use and old age. And every day we replace billions and billions of cells. Well, what do they get, who replaces them? And the answer is we have what are called adult stem cells because they're stem cells in an adult, but they're the same as a child's stem cells, which are essentially the same as an embryonic stem cell. Your body has these reserve cells, and the understanding of these reserve cells is that they will repair or replace anything that your intention is focused on. But if your intention has already been diverted because you say, well, I can't heal that because I was told no one can heal that. No one can regenerate heart tissue. That's what we're told. Guess what? Now we know heart tissue regenerates and people are regenerating heart tissue. We were told brain cells don't regenerate. We now know that this is totally false as well, that stem cells can repair the brain all the time. There is nothing in our body that cannot be repaired. The only limitations are not the cells, but it's the perception that we lead with that says, who are we? You know, we were programmed, and this is the part that the joke and the reality of it. When we were very young, we were born, most of us were born in the presence of a doctor. We grew up in a family, and anytime anybody got sick in a general family, you were told, oh, we got to take so-and-so to the doctor. So we got a program. What was the program? It said, you don't heal yourself, the doctor heals you. And so here's the joke. We have already, the innate system will already heal you without any doctor. But the program says, no, I can't heal myself. The doctor heals me. So guess what? Your thought, your perception says, even if you got something, you got damage and you say you want to heal it, your perception says, no, I don't heal it. I have to go to the doctor. Well, here's the joke. Many people get well on the way to the doctor. And the relevance was simply this. Once you cleared the first hurdle, which you created, then the innate system was able to heal itself. So the really important understanding is most of our limitations have been programmed into us because we've been systematically disempowered in our lives.
In 1978, I was blessed to appear on a program in Vienna with Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl wrote a book called The Man's Search for Meaning. He was in the Holocaust. He was in Auschwitz. He was a psychiatrist, medical doctor, and he was removed from his home. They took everything that he had, put him in that horror story of World War II. And he wrote this book on logotherapy. I'm sure you're familiar with Viktor Frankl's great work. And he said that when people in the concentration camps had an anticipation of the day that they were going to be liberated, and that would be April the 15th and 1944, and they would just, hang on and believe and get to that point, and the day would come and they wouldn't be liberated. They might have had a dream, they might have had some kind of a rumor that there was, that the Americans were coming or whatever, and they didn't come, and they would literally die within a day or so of that. And he said on the death certificate we would always write they died of tuberculosis or whatever it was, but he said they died of no longer having meaning in their life, no longer having a sense that they had within them the power to. Now, we watch television, and listen to the radio and look at Time magazine, and you see full-page ads, and you see almost every other commercial on television these days. And this is a radically new thing, by the way, Bruce. I mean, this is within the last 4 or 5 years. It's almost as if the pharmaceuticals have gotten a hold of the entire broadcast era.
Yes.
and use this. And so there's, we're talking about trying to overcome some major programming here, aren't we? I mean, it's like, how often do you hear you have to take a pill for virtually any ailment that might be concerning you, and then if you don't have one, they'll invent one,
and create new ailments.
Right, exactly. So how do we go about overcoming this massive kind of onslaught that each and every one of us are subjected to, and our children are subjected to? And I fear that we're raising a generation of people who have come to believe internally that they have absolutely no control over their destiny when it comes to their bodies.
Well, this is the big problem because it's a sales pitch. And basically, they already knew this. They already knew that if you program this into the system, then it will automatically play by itself from the subconscious mind. And the nature of the mind, the way that I look at it, it's very interesting. Just think of it this way. The function of the mind is to create coherence between your beliefs and the reality that you experience. So if you have a belief in your mind that you can't do something, or that you are susceptible to something, and that's your belief, then the mind's function is to create coherence so that you will manifest that belief to be true. So it's very interesting because Henry Ford, he would say, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right. And this is why it's so important for us to recognize that when we listen to these ads, and if we buy that belief, then it will become real. If you buy into the belief that cancer runs in a family and that you are susceptible, then you have the highest probability of getting a cancer. But you know what's an interesting point? They've done studies of looking at adopted children coming into a family where cancer is already running in the family. And they find that the adopted child has the cancer with the same propensity as any genetic member of the family, even though they came from a different genetics. And so the point was, it was this programming. And I think the hard part is because we have a feeling that, well, a child doesn't really begin to learn until they're talking and they're verbal and all that stuff. And the fact is this, we now know very clearly that we are already downloading programs in utero. When we are in a fetal stage, we're already downloading behaviors that we're acquiring from our parents. And when you're born, it's already been determined about half your personality is already established at the time of birth based on your pre-birth experiences. And so why it's important is things that we have no cognizance of, no awareness of, because they were so early in our lives, are things that are programming our lives on a day-by-day basis from the experiences of the programs of our lives.
Yeah, I spoke about this last night. These are called viruses of the mind, and these are just belief systems that have been passed on to us, not because there's any particles involved. There's no substance. There's no form to any of these things. These are ideas, and these ideas we get. I just talked. My brother Dave just got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease about 10 months ago or so, and I saw him just before I came here, and he's walking with. Are you familiar? You're familiar with Parkinson's, yeah. I'm sure. And so he takes very, very, very slow steps. And when I was talking to him, he said, I'll be in a wheelchair at this time next year. And now this is my brother. This is my brother that I went through all the orphanages with and all the foster homes. I mean, he was like, we slept in the same bed together until we were 15 years old. I mean, everywhere we went, my brother Dave was with me. And he knows what I write about, what I talk about. I handed him a copy of your book. I gave him the CDs that you put out. I said, but he can't get it. You see, he's been so programmed by this medication that he has to take, which is very strong. He's taking 8 or 9 different pills a day. How do you help my brother? How do you help
I think this is something that we should all understand, because I tried to do the same kind of thing. Once I started to recognize, oh my gosh, there's a deeper meaning and understanding of how we can get out of all these issues. And then, of course, what I really want to do is go to people that I know and say, you could do this.
Yeah.
And I realized that was a very large expenditure of energy with no return.
Right.
And the reality that I finally walked away with, and I own, and it's very critical, is until the person is ready to seek an answer, then what we're doing is not really very much help in their regard, and maybe interfering with them. And so it's really better for them. They have to be the one to make a decision. And so it's important for all of us that are really trying to help other people that that's not necessarily a very productive process, because it's really the individual who has to make up their mind on that, and when they're ready to heal themselves. And when they're ready, this is the fun part, there's something called spontaneous remission. And what is a spontaneous remission? Well, these are people, let's say, with terminal illnesses. And everybody counts them out. And then for some particular reason, which I'll get into in a second, something happens, and all of a sudden, they get up out of that deathbed, and they're no longer sick. And you want to say, well, what is the one common underlying feature that connects all spontaneous remission? And the answer is, every one of these people has had a profound change in belief about who they are or what was happening in their lives, where they completely let go of the old belief saying, I'm not buying into this anymore, I'm getting up and I'm getting out of this hospital. Or the people mostly, like the ones that say, well, you only have a few weeks left, and they're thinking, well, if I'm going to just have a few weeks left, why do I want to stay in this hospital bed? Let me get out of here and go have a moment of life. You know what makes their health come back? Is because they let go of all of the things that actually gave them the disease, their belief issues, because they let it go, because they said, well, I don't have time to think about this. I'm just going to go out and enjoy my life. In that enjoyment of life and letting go of the belief, they change their perceptions. And the beautiful part about it is, as fast as you change your perception is as fast as you reprogram the cells. The cells are programmable and instantaneous.
Dr. Lipton, let's leave it right there. We'll be coming right back after this break. I'm Summer McStravick with Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Wayne Dyer. You're listening to Conversations to Awaken Your Soul.
Live from the Hay House I Can Do It conference in Las Vegas, it's Conversations to Awaken Your Soul.
Hi, I'm Summer McStravick. Welcome back to Conversations to Awaken Your Soul. I'm sitting here today with Dr. Wayne Dyer. You may know him from his Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life book that's recently come out, as well as his PBS special, or perhaps his program right here on HayHouseRadio.com. Along beside him is Dr. Bruce Lipton, whose new book, The Biology of Belief, is out. And we're talking about how both of your work dovetails so nicely together. You're talking about changing your thoughts to change your cells. You, of course, have been speaking about changing your thoughts to change your life. So this is a perfect integration of both of your work, having you converse together. Bruce, you were saying you change your thinking, and that is what erases, essentially, the disease. But how do you tell your cells from your mind, go do it now, please? I mean, is it that simple?
Well, it's simple, and then there's a little mystery. So let's clear the mystery up. There's two parts to the mind. There's the conscious part and the subconscious part. And they're profoundly different pieces. They're not the same thing. The conscious part has your source, your spiritual connection to it. It's your thinking mind. But here's what's important. The conscious part is the part of the mind that has your wishes, your desires, your aspirations, what you want from life. The subconscious mind is a machine. It's a record playback device. You habituate a program, you repeat something enough times, it's recorded in the subconscious mind, you push the play button, and it continues to play that for the rest of your life unless you rewrite the program. Now so I can just lead into Dr. Dyer's stuff, which is great because he really gets into the manifestation of making these changes. What I would just want to mention is this. There's been a tendency for us to think that we run our lives with our conscious mind. I want this in my life, this is my desires, these are the things that I want. So we have a perception that our conscious mind is running the show. It has now been recognized by neuroscientists that this is totally incorrect, that the conscious mind only operates about 5% of the day at the most, and generally about 1% of the time, meaning your life is being driven by your subconscious. Now here's where the disconnect comes from. The primary programs in your subconscious mind you acquired from other people. You got them from your parents, your family members, your community, your schooling. And why is that relevant? Because, simple point, most of the beliefs that you downloaded do not support your own wishes and your own desires. Most of the beliefs are limiting. In fact, just to bring it up, down under in New Zealand and Australia, very important, they talk about something called cutting the tall poppies, which is about raising children. And what it means is this. When you grow poppies, they all grow up about the same height. But every now and then, one poppy shoots up higher than all the other poppies, so the gardener cuts the head off the tall poppy. What they're saying and using this down under and explaining is when a child starts to exceed with characters the average, then it's the function to cut the head off and make everybody average, which means there's a tendency to disempower us, and that's what the programs in the subconscious are. You've heard parents talk to kids like, who do you think you are? You don't deserve this. You're not smart enough. You're a sickly child. And here's the simple point. If you're under 6 years of age and you hear these proclamations, they go straight down into the subconscious mind and they're programmed there. Now you ask, why is my life difficult? And the answer is this, because only 5% of your life is coming from what you want, and 95% is the program from the subconscious mind, which is programmed by others, and almost all of that is limiting your ability. So 95% of the day, you're not following what you want, you're following other people's programs. And the significance in the last step before I bring on the master of this is there's always been a tendency, well, if I just become consciously aware of my problem, then I resolved it. And here's the failure. The subconscious mind is like a tape player, a record playback device. There's nobody in it. And the relevance to that is when you keep talking to yourself about improving your life, who are you talking to? And the answer is not the subconscious, because there's nobody in there. And that's why it's so frustrating for many people just to try and say, okay, you could do this better, and then find out you keep repeating the program. Because there are far better ways to take that conscious mind and access the subconscious programming and rewrite that. But generally, just becoming aware, you go to a psychologist or psychiatrist and you find your mom did this, your dad did that, your girlfriend or your boyfriend did all these things, and that's why your life turns out that way, and now you're all aware. Oh my God, I understand why my life really stinks. And then you realize, yeah, but your life still stinks. Because even though you're aware of it, you haven't changed the program. So the really understanding is how you go into that subconscious mind and rewrite those programs.
Yeah, and you know, for me, it's, and I work on this stuff myself all the time. I don't think, you don't have to be terminally ill. You don't have to be someone who's got, you know, serious illnesses and so on. You can be someone who gets tired a lot. You can be, you know, someone who gets depressed easily. You can be someone who's manipulated and controlled by other people. For me, I have a lot of pressures on me. I have writing deadlines. I have 8 children. I have movies to make. I have travel schedules to keep and so on. And I find internally that there's a time when I sometimes get like things in my chest. My stomach gets a little bit upset. And I decide for myself, and this is I think this is a really important point, is that I am not going to any longer be a victim of a thought system which says that when you have a lot on your plate, therefore you have to be anxious, you have to get worked up, you have to get tired, whatever it might be. And so, you know, I'm not talking about a terminal illness here. I'm talking about how can I make myself feel better in the next 30 minutes while I sit down to work out this writing deadline and so on. And things like you talk about in your book, things like meditation, things like getting quiet. But even more than that, and we talked about this at the break, it's like, what kind of energy field do you find yourself in? I ask you, what do you think about this whole idea that you should go to your doctor, to medical community, and get a physical every year? So what is it like for a person to go into a place where everybody there is looking for something that's wrong? And if they find something that's wrong, it's of benefit to them. If they don't find something that's wrong, what do you think they're going to be looking for? And why would all of us want to go in there? They've got machines now, I understand, that they can put you in, put on a switch, and find out anything at all that's going anywhere from your toenails to the top of your head, any place in there. Who would want to know that? You know, my friend Deepak Chopra, do you know Deepak?
Yes.
You know, talked about one of his best friends. He died, he had a black mark on his lung. And when he found out that he had this black mark on his lung, it meant lung cancer, and he was devastated. And within 3 weeks, he was dead. When they were cleaning out his office, they found x-rays that had been taken of him 20 years before. Same black mark was on the lung, the exact same. It had been there for 20 years, but it wasn't until he found out and thought that this was a brand new thing, and then the mind began to take over. So this isn't just like good stuff to read about and to write about. This is something that you can really go inside, whoever you are listening, whatever your life situation is. You have to make decisions. I don't go for physicals. I don't want anybody looking at me and telling me this, you know, this test is up, this one is down, this is an indication. You got a 17% of living another 3 years. You got an 18%. I don't want to hear anything like that. I figure that the less I know about what is wrong, and the more I believe about what I have the power to do something about, isn't that changing your perception? Isn't that entering into that subconscious world and putting your attention on something that you want rather than on something you don't want?
Yeah, and I love this because we talk about the fact that most of our lives are programmed by these subconscious beliefs. And then what I want to suggest to some people is that go back in your life, and I bet you there was a time period where you were the healthiest and happiest and the world was going great and everything was wonderful for a period of time. And what I'm going to recognize is that if you go back, it was probably when you fell in love the first time. And why is that important? Because you're running your life generally from your subconscious programs. Just programs. You can drive the car without thinking about it. You can get dressed without thinking about it. But when you fall in love, something happens. I call it the honeymoon effect. And what it represents is this. For the first time, you don't let the programs run you. Let's say I say the day before you meet this person and you're going to go on the first date. The day before, I say, how long did it take you to get dressed? And you say, well, 10 minutes I was out of the house. And then I say, yeah, but now you're going to go on a first date with this person you think is like going to be the perfect person in your life. I say, how long does it take you to get dressed? You say, well, maybe 2 hours or more. And I say, well, what was the difference yesterday and today? Yesterday I did it by habit. Today I'm being self-reflective. I'm not letting the habit run me. I am going to watch myself. So all of a sudden, instead of running from the program, you're running lifetime consciousness. It's sort of like Buddhist mindfulness. And the relevance about it is, think about it. Day before, you ate your hamburger in a couple of minutes. Now you're going on a dinner date. I bet you remember every silverware usage, what every fork and spoon was for. You remember every rule of etiquette. You talk without food in your mouth. You blot your face with a napkin. And all of a sudden you realize, isn't everything wonderful? Look how all the dialogue, everything was great. What was different in the honeymoon period? And the answer was this. You ran your life with your conscious mind and did not rely on the programs. And the relevance was, go back into that period when you fell in love in that honeymoon and realize the character and quality of your life was beyond anything you can imagine. And then, of course, the unfortunate part is the honeymoon part wears out. It wears out for most people because life starts to get crowded in. You start thinking, and here's where the problem goes. The moment your mind, your conscious mind starts thinking about the job, the issues in your life, your family, or whatever it is, the moment it's thinking, it's not paying attention. The moment it's not paying attention, you automatically kick into the programs, and the programs are from other people. So your behavior is totally different. And usually it's a shock to your mate the first time that actually happens, because up to now they've seen you run this beautiful program of your conscious life and they love everything about it. One day your mind gets busy, and all of a sudden they ask you something, you turn around, you respond from the subconscious program that they've never seen before, and they're in shock, like, who is this person all of a sudden? And then, of course, you respond by saying, what are you talking about? This is the way I've always been, which is actually true, but you didn't notice that you were playing an automatic program, and this is the failure of the subconscious mind in our lives. The nature of subconscious means unconscious, meaning we don't play it. And so what I usually say in an audience that most people can relate to is I say, well, you know somebody, your friend, and you know your friend's parent, and you recognize that your friend and their parent share the same behavior. So one day you volunteer, you know, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then you back away from Bill because he's just going to be like ballistic that how can you compare me to my dad? And why this is a very important, profound little insight for this reason. It says that everyone else can see that Bill is like his dad because he's playing the programs that he got downloaded from his dad. Bill is the only one that doesn't see the program. Why is that? Just put that into your own life and realize the programs that you got, you rarely see them play because when they're playing is because your conscious mind's busy. And the issues are, and this is what I really want to get people to understand, is that we think we run our lives with our conscious mind. When life doesn't work out, then we have to blame somebody else. The universe is not my friend because I wanted a relationship and I wanted health and I wanted these things, and the universe didn't give them to me, so I'm a victim of the universe. And the unfortunate truth is that almost inevitably it was our own self-limitations and our self-sabotage from the subconscious mind because we didn't see we were shooting ourselves in the foot because we don't see that.
I want to feel good. I want to feel good. I want to feel good. It's an affirmation. It's on my cell phone. If you call my cell phone answering machine says, this is Wayne Dyer that you've reached, and I want to feel good. And if your message is designed to do anything other than that, you've reached the wrong number. You've called it.
I do, because I call you before every show, and I say, Wayne, you're going to show up, right?
I say, I want to feel good. I don't want to hear from you.
I hear this every week for 4 years.
The difference, Swami Muktananda in India had an ashram, and before you would enter his ashram, you had to answer the question, do you know the difference between good and God? I want to feel good, I want to feel God. And what is the difference between good and God? Zero. One little zero. There's no difference between feeling good and feeling God. To me, one of the ways to make access, I don't call it the unconscious mind. I don't like the word unconscious. Subconscious, temporary subconscious, whatever, but unconscious means I can't access it. It's outside of my reach. But subconscious, it's down there. It's maybe very inaccessible, but I want to go in there and I want to tell whatever it is, whoever those people are, there's a thing called neuro-linguistic programming. And NLP is nothing more than finding, with depressed patients, what we have found with people who are severely depressed and who've been on Prozac and so on, what we do is we take them off the Prozac and they measure the brain and the chemistry of the brain, and then they will ask the person to no longer identify with an event in their life. that is causing them to be depressed, but instead to step outside of their body, to become the observer to it, and instead of saying, okay, here's another thing that's causing me to be depressed, you say, you put your attention on something else. And the thing you put your attention on is, there goes my brain again misfiring. It is doing something that it has been trained to do, and you're the observer, you're just watching it. And when people then are trained to put their attention on any moment in their life that they were happy, that they were fulfilled, that they were, as you mentioned, that they were in love, that the chemist, then they measure the chemistry through an MRI. They measure the chemistry of their brain, and their brain has changed exactly the same way that taking one of these pills does, except there's no side effects, you know. And the ability to be able to reach into that subconscious. And I loved what you wrote about, Bruce, and that's why I want you to talk a bit about it in our remaining time, is like you're a cell biologist, is that right? Cellular biologist?
Yes.
Right. And you taught at medical school at
University of
Wisconsin in Madison for 20 years?
About 12 years or 15 years, and then I went to do research at Stanford University School of Medicine.
So you've been around the field of medicine a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And you were teaching potential doctors, people who were in training to be doctors, for a lot of years. And there came a time, there was some experiments that you were doing in your cellular biology work and so on, that you began to realize, I'm a phony, in a sense. Not as a person, but that I am teaching something that the research is no longer bearing out. And you left.
Yeah, I was out of integrity. It was sort of like knowingly teaching students that people were victims when I saw from the research, and I was working on stem cells, from that research that, no, the cells were modifiable and changeable by just changing the environment, which meant that any individual can personally change their perception or environment directly and have the same effect by changing their genetics and behavior through this process, so they were not victims of anything other than not being aware that they had the opportunity to do
what
that.
was the moment? Was there an experiment that you had done? Was there something that you came home one day and said to somebody, I can't teach this anymore? Was there something that you realized? Was there some kind of a piece of research that said, it isn't real? Because doctors are looking for two things. They're looking for the particles in there that we can alter with drugs, or we're going to cut them out and do it through surgery, right? And you were beginning to see that there's another alternative that is even more realistic. Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I also want to say, how come there aren't swarms of Dr. Liptons leaving the medical schools for this very reason? If they're all looking at the evidence you're looking at, and if you'd answer.
There's an unfortunate situation, and I have to, if I'm going to call what the truth is in my way of seeing it, and the answer is that the medical community is manipulated by the pharmaceutical industry.
Wow.
And it's big money and big farm, and we all bought the farm on that one.
And our legislators.
And our legislators, which are getting paid, and there's money. They have more than 2 lobbyists for every representative and senator in the Congress. So they've got 1,000 lobbyists just for their own market.
To keep the prices up.
To keep the prices up, and the whole thing is that, for example, one of the biggest obvious facts that always gets me upset is Prozac, one of the biggest selling drugs on the planet, has been verified in a laboratory testing by the drug companies to be no more effective than a sugar pill. And yet it's billions of dollars in this, and that's because people believe in Prozac. But that's called the placebo effect. And yet the side effects from Prozac are disastrous.
Especially on young people.
On young people. And all the drugs are giving young people that the concept that medication is the way out is absolutely, totally fraught with all the biggest problems in the world. And a simple truth, even the Medical Association, even the AMA has recognized in an article that they published that medicine is the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. And it's primarily due to the drug industry, and they're focusing on the wrong information. And they recognize that. So your question always, eludes me is, how come there's so many people that still follow that? Except then I have to answer this. I started talking on this in the public in 1985. I didn't get any physicians to show up until about 2000. And around 2000, some started to come, and then a little bit more and a little bit more. So I'm watching, there's an evolution going on right now, that even physicians are finally realizing, because of their own traumatized life, because they're out there to help people, and they're killing people. They're ready for a change. And I think the whole system is ready for a change, and we're facing that right now. And the most important and best change is to recognize that your own brain is your best pharmacy. Everything in your head will fix everything in your body. And that's all we really need to know, but we need to re-educate ourselves to access that.
So going back to the first question, do you remember when the moment was?
Yeah, there was this moment where I was working on stem cells, and it was interesting because a lot of people think stem cells are relatively recent insights. My first stem cell cultures were in 1967, so it was 40 years ago. I was working on cloning stem cells, and in this process, I create a culture dish derived from one cell, and thousands of cells in there after divides and divides and divides. And the point is, all cells are genetically identical. So I take these genetically identical cells, split them up into 3 groups, put one in a Petri plate A, one in a Petri plate B, and one in a C, change the culture environment just a little bit in A, B, and C. And the net result was the cells in A form muscle, the cells in B form bone, the cells in C form fat cells. And the fact is, well, wait, they were all genetically identical, so the fate of the cell was controlled not by the genes, the fate of the cell was controlled by the environment. And why that all of a sudden hit me is like, oh my God, I'm teaching genetic control, that genes control everything, and it was clear and obvious that genes had no control in this process, that the cell was adjusting its genetic expression to meet the demands of the environment. And so let me give you just the little insight that really just all of a sudden popped out of that, and that is this. We see ourselves as single individual entities. This is a misperception. You are not a single entity, you are a community, because the living things are called cells, and you are made up of about 50 trillion cells, so your body is a community. And why that's relevant is when I would work in my cell cultures and I'd take my culture dish and put it into a bad environment, the cells will physically get sick, you can see that, they'd stop growing and they start dying, and then I take that culture dish, same dish, move it out of that bad environment, put it into a good environment, the cells would immediately recover, start growing and reproducing and flourishing. Why is that important? Because think about this as who you are. You are skin-covered Petri dishes. You have 50 trillion cells in your Petri dish under your skin. You take your Petri dish and put it in this negative environment, I can assure you, I already know what's going to happen. You're going to cause those cells to get sick. Not that the cells are organically sick, they're just complementing what the environment is. And the relevance, take your skin-covered Petri dish, move it into a better environment, and the cells will immediately get well. And the relevance about that is you're not a victim, you're a master. You are the controller of this, and we were not teaching that in school. All we were teaching is victims, you don't heal yourself, somebody else does it, and that was totally wrong.
Albert Einstein once said that the most important decision you'll ever make is to decide once and for all whether you live in a universe that is supportive, that supports you and is friendly, or whether you live in a universe that is hostile and is non-supportive. And if you believe that you live in a universe that is not supportive and hostile, you will be looking for occasions to support that very hypothesis that you live in, and you'll see people who are consistently out there looking for occasions to be offended, looking for things that are wrong, finding fault with the way people dress, the way people speak, the way people are in politics. Everything about the world becomes this negativity, and it's got to impact them in their physiology as well. On the other hand, if you're a person who believes you live in a friendly universe, and this is a place that supports you, and this is a place that works, and it isn't a place that's going to go into a deep recession and the whole world is going to be a terrible place and all of that, which you hear all the time, and we are bombarded by messages that are designed to make us believe that this is a non-supportive, unfriendly place, because that's what gets people frightened. And then, of course, when you go to the commercials, they give you something to take care of that for you.
And speaking of going to the commercials, here we are wrapping up our program today. I'm your host, Summer McStravick. We've been with Dr. Wayne Dyer, Dr. Bruce Lipton. Thank you both for a wonderful conversation.
So nice to meet you. God bless you, my friend. Namaste.
And enlightening. And thank you all for joining us today. Conversations to Awaken Your Soul.
That was so